I'm Scarlet Fu of Bloomberg Television. We turn our equality spotlight now to Jim Fitterling, who walks the talk in embracing social change as CEO of Dow Inc. Jim, welcome, and thank you for joining us.
Hi, Scarlet. Thank you for having me.
Now, the pandemic and our national reckoning with race has put economic inequality, health inequality, and racial injustice into stark relief. I wonder if you could start us off by giving us a brief overview of Dow's response to these systemic problems and how quickly you've been able to implement all these changes.
Yes, it's been quite a year, and I think we started with the pandemic and the pandemic response, which challenged everybody in our team globally. And then quickly on top of that, we had issues of racial injustice, which caught everybody's attention. And here at a time where everybody was pulling together to try to fight the virus and try to make sure we maintained a healthy workplace and tried to keep things running, at the same time we were watching on TV some really incredible events. The murders of Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and then, of course, the George Floyd incidents. And, I was, at my age, I was thrown back into what it felt like in the late 60s and some of the unrest that we saw during that time. And it was a very stark time. And so we spent, as a team, a lot of time listening to our people and about their experiences, not just their experiences at work, but their experiences in everyday life and some of the injustices that they saw. And we said, look, we have to take action, just like we've taken action on the pandemic and how we're going to operate our business. We've got to take action on racial issues and on racial justice. And so we stepped up and we put together a program called Dow Acts. Dow Acts stands for advocacy, community, and talent, and we felt like we needed to do all three of those things. Our experience in leading on issues like gender parity and opportunities for women, leading on LGBTQ rights, and the work that we did on advocacy there, we said, look, we have to step in and on behalf of our employees, take a stand and help create the opportunities for advancement and address just the big disparities that they have in their lives versus what we have in our lives.
Now, one thing Dow also did is you're a founding member of the Board of Diversity Action Alliance, which has a concrete target of increasing the number of Black directors to at least one, disclosing the race and ethnicities of directors on the boards and reporting on D&I measures on an annual basis. Is this a quota, and is there a specific timeline for achieving all of this?
It's an intention. We want our board to be representative of the world around us, and we want it to be representative of what we want to try to achieve as a company. And so if you look at our board, we're fortunate we're in the top quartile of all corporate boards in terms of diversity, whether it's race, whether it's gender, and all races. We have 3 African-American directors on our board right now. And we have had representation for quite some time. So it was very normal for us to step up to that. We also have similar targets for representation in my leadership team, in our people leaders, and within our corporation. And if people would go out to Dow.com and take a look at our latest sustainability report, it's called a sustainability report, but honestly, you might as well call it an ESG report because it's got everything in there, including tremendous detail on race, pay equity, gender pay gap, which there is none, but it's out there for everybody to see, so there's nothing to hide. But that doesn't solve the issues that we saw in graphic relief, and so what we need to do is we need to step up. And in Dow Acts, we committed some dollars. We've always been big supporters of historically Black colleges and universities, and we hire from there to bring talent into the organization. So we increased our efforts there, both in contributions and in hiring, and we committed another $5 million to help racial equality and social justice. On our advocacy pillar, we put in place a social justice council inside the organization. And that council is really to help us deal with racial injustices that occur. We have an organization where we have the capability for ethics and compliance hotline inside the company, but maybe sometimes issues of race wouldn't always make it through that
Right.
kind of a hotline. So we wanted a council that represents the population of our people to step up and say, hey, we've got some things that aren't happening the way we want them to, and we need to address that change. And then we're a product of small communities. We have been since our founding here in Midland, Michigan. It's not a very large community, 42,000 people. If you go around the Dow world, we're in a lot of smaller towns. And so we have an outsized influence on what happens in those communities. And I would have to say, because Dow's an international company, a lot of those small communities may be more progressive than people believe. But these communities make a big difference in how people get treated, both in creating opportunities, but also how they might get treated just from policing and police reforms and other things that need to happen inside the communities. So we looked at all of those things and are making a concerted effort to try to make things better, to try to create more opportunities for advancement, and try to create more opportunities even beyond HBCUs into skilled trades and bringing people into the workforce in that way.
It's pretty clear from what you described that you've embraced this idea that a company's mission, it goes beyond shareholder primacy, but to all the stakeholders, to not just shareholders, but customers, suppliers, your employees, and your community. I mean, bottom line, how can a chemical company like Dow, through your products, promote diversity and equality? You talked a lot about what you do for your employees and for your community, but what about the products that you sell? How do you promote diversity in that way?
Well, we're an innovation house at the end of the day. So when you look at our customers, they're brand owners, and they come to us for all kinds of innovations in their formulations and their products. So I'll give you a real simple example, might be hair care products. We make a lot of materials that go into hair care formulations, shampoos, conditioners, treatments. And so when you get into our organization, we have within our organization the capability to talk to populations of people about their challenges with some of those brands. So for example, our African Heritage ERG, we have actually worked with them on skincare and hair care products to try to address some of the issues that they face when they go to the supermarket. A lot of brands are not tailored for them. And we know this because for many years we've dealt with the Brazilian market, which has its own unique features and needs for their style of hair and their hair care challenges. And so we're able to weave what we do in the ERGs into what we do with the business strategy and how we interact with our brand owners and their teams that actually formulate and test those products. Same with Procter & Gamble when it comes to making razors that have to work with African-American skin. Those have some unique challenges, and they need something different than I might need for shaving on a daily basis. That's one example of how we would face those kinds of market challenges.
Let's go back to that idea of employee resource groups, the ERGs, because they obviously play a big role in what you do and how you come up with your products and how you tailor your products for your customers. To me, ERGs are often something that is kind of a social network within a company. They host after-hours drinks. They host programming events tailored at specific audiences. Clearly, you've turned ERGs at Dow into something more active. How would you suggest other companies turn ERGs from something passive into an active force with a seat at the table that feels empowered to speak up?
I think like a lot of companies, ERGs started the way you described, but then they evolved. They evolved into discussions about career development and how do you progress within the company and what are some of the challenges that you face and how do you develop a mentor relationship. And then they work their way into how can we be part of the innovation platform? So how do we work with research to maybe innovate products for our own ethnicity and help to make that better? They also can break down barriers. So we have an ERG called the Middle Eastern Intercultural Network, which we created some years ago when we were making investments in the Middle East and joint ventures there. And you can imagine after 9/11, what the sensitivities were here around the Muslim population. And yet we have a very large Muslim population that works in Dows. So that ERG helped us to talk about, what is Muslim culture really about, and what is that life really about, and not the extreme things that we saw, but the day-to-day life, and break down some of those barriers and make them feel more comfortable. And at the height of our investment in Sidara, we trained 1,000 Saudi engineers at our locations all around the world without an incident. And I would say not only without an incident, but it was it brought a lot to the organization in terms of their ability at a working level to actually feel what it's like to live somebody's life. And that's what we're trying to do today with the ERGs, is make it all about the experience, a sense of inclusion, a sense of belonging, a sense of pride, and also the opportunity to get that same chance for advancement as everyone else.
Well, speaking of advancement, you started working at Dow in the mid-'80s. You are what's considered a lifer at the company. So you've seen some incredible cultural changes in the country and in your industry. So I want to get your thoughts on the role of the CEO, especially in 2020. It's changed so much. There's now this expectation that a CEO needs to be publicly outspoken and leading when it comes to social issues. And this has now almost become part of the job. I wonder, how much time do you spend on cultural, social issues versus making and selling chemicals? Would you say it's 50-50? Is it 80-20?
It's a balanced scorecard today. I mean, you have to deliver financial results. And so nowhere along the way did we say that we weren't going to deliver financial results, but we also are expected to deliver in a lot of other areas too, like sustainability, like human rights, and like dealing with some of the issues we saw from racial justice standpoint. And it's interesting that, some of my counterparts would say that business is a catalyst for positive change. I believe that. I think that's what we've been trying to do, either through the Business Roundtable statement that was signed over a year ago. That was never meant to be exclusive. We're shifting away from profits to focus on all these other things. We know that we need to do both, but we have to set the tone. And, big business, just like government, has to set the tone for the change that we want to see in the world, and we have to create the environment that we want for our people. And that means we have to transcend the company into the communities where we operate. And we have to respond to those demands. And those consumer demands, in many cases, are also social demands that we have to deal with. So whether it's sustainability and what impact that has on our products, which ultimately has an impact on the cost of the products to the consumer, that comes right back to returns to the shareholders. We've got to look at all that. And I'd say that's the biggest change to me. Is it used to be very heavily and almost solely a financial return, where if you were making the financial results, everything else would solve itself.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody looks at it that way anymore. And I certainly don't. I said before, I spend as much as 25% of my time on sustainability. This year, if you look at pandemic, flood relief, hurricane relief, relief from incidents that are kind of outside the control of business, and work on racial injustice and equality, it's a very balanced scorecard where I spend that time.
Does it frustrate you, Jim, that acknowledging racial inequality has become politicized and the federal government kind of drops the ball on it and is so divided that it doesn't really want to address it, leading the private sector to lead the way on this front?
It doesn't frustrate me as much as some of the atrocities that you see on social media or on television. I mean, we've missed the boat somewhere in terms of how we treat people. We've just forgotten what civil society is all about, and it requires all of us working together to move society into a better place. And this polarization, I mean, just look at where we are with COVID today. We've politicized something as simple as wearing a mask, or whether you should get a vaccine when there's a vaccine treatment. We've made that so political that now nobody knows how to sort out the scientific from the political. And that's not a good situation for us to be in. And it's not just the United States. We're seeing this all over the world. there's any silver lining to the pandemic, it should be to cause us to take a little bit of a timeout and reassess our priorities and how we want to move forward, government and business. And there's no reason we can't do this together. We don't have to be at odds with each other to make the world better.
You broke new ground, Jim, as an openly gay CEO in the manufacturing industry. How do you think it filters through to how you think about diversity, how you think about racial injustice, how you think about sustainability, or any of the issues that you're confronted with?
When I decided to come out, and I made a conscious decision to live most of my life in the closet corporately, because I had made an interpretation in my own head about the risk reward of coming out. And, you know, you create fears in your own mind about how you'll be viewed or how you'll be accepted by coming out. As I look back on it now after coming out, I've had nothing short of overwhelming positive support, very, very little negative from coming out from all corners of the world. And I would say, you know, I think when we embrace something like sustainability, where we're trying to tackle climate change, carbon neutrality, cleaning up plastic waste, stopping the waste, making a more circular economy. A lot of times when we approach those type of topics, we look at it with some fear of the unknown, instead of embracing that it's something that needs to be done and figure out how to make it happen. And so I think going through that in my own personal situation gave me a different perspective on life. I'm also a stage 4 cancer survivor, so none of this seems as much life and death as that. And so that gives me a little bit different perspective as well. And I think those two things together really have made the difference. As business leaders,
interesting.
One of our
No, I was going to say it's interesting that lends to fearlessness on your part. Go on, please.
Yeah, it's not complete fearlessness, right? I mean, but it's a different perspective. You just have a different perspective after you've gone through that, and things are not as bad as they seem. And you understand that when you're dealing with cancer, it is what it is, right? You don't know, you've got it, you don't know why you got it, you don't know what the cause was, but it is what it is, and you've got to come up with a game plan to deal with it. That's where we are with sustainability. That's where we are with the virus and the pandemic. That's where we are with racial injustice, and that's where we are with equality. This is what it is. It isn't nice. We have seen some pretty ugly things this year, but we have to deal with them. Nobody else is going to deal with it. You've got to take ownership of it, and you've got to deal with it, and we've got to take action. So one of the things that we try to do here is, it isn't about talk, it's about action. We've got to turn this into actions that we can take. As an employer, one of the most important things that we do every day for our people is make sure that we have a safe environment for them to come to work. When we get into equality, and we were going through this with LGBT marriage equality, one of the things that I took from Kenji Yoshino, who's a legal scholar in New York at NYU, on marriage equality was, you really have to treat the workplace a little bit like an embassy. You may be working in a country where being gay is not accepted at all. But if you've got an employee that's gay coming to work every day in your place of work, you want them to be safe, regardless of what's going on outside. You don't want to create a problem for them in their country, but at work, you want them to be safe. So in that way, you treat the company a little bit like an embassy. And we have to be that way when it comes to stakeholder capitalism. We have to treat our communities, we have to treat our customers, we have to treat our employees the way that we want to be treated. And that means that we have to get out in front and set the example and set the tone for everyone else to follow. And if we do that, business can be a cause for good.
In the meantime, Jim, I want to get your thoughts
change.
On the working from home and return to office debate. Some degree of work from home will likely be permanent. Do you see a link between remote work and a commitment to diversity? Because some people say remote work can boost diversity because it broadens the talent pool to include those with medical conditions, stay-at-home parents, seniors, while the counter argument is that it's hard for someone who's underrepresented to be visible in a remote work kind of setup. Distance reinforces people's tendency to want to take shortcuts and favor people who think like them or look like them. What's your take on all of this?
I'm tremendously positively surprised by just how well we've done moving to work from home. I mean, we've had 2/3 of our workforce working from home for most of the year, and it's been seamless. And if anything, we've gotten closer to our customers. We've done a better job of servicing them. Yet we've got 1/3 of our population that goes into the plant every day that makes sure the product keeps moving, and they're continuing to get their job done. I don't know. I think part of that is going to exist for a long time. So I think we're going to have more flexibility and more work-life balance from that than we've ever had. I'm not sure that we can stay that way forever. I don't think we can stay 100% work from home forever. I think it's difficult to transmit culture when you're working from home. So if you look at my population today, 40% of my workforce is less than 5 years with the company. Now, if you stop everything and say everybody go work from home and keep the company running, and your employee base has 20 years of experience, that's easy to do because culturally they're already in the culture and they know what's going on and they know how to do it. But if you've got a lot of new employees coming in and you're trying to build culture and transmit culture, that's a little bit tougher to do, I think, remotely. And so you're going to have a combination of in the office and remote. We haven't really gotten into the point of how that's all going to work as we move forward because we've had fits and starts with cases in different locations around the world. But I think we're going to find a balance as a company where we're doing both. And I do think the positive is we've allowed more flexibility for people. People have been very productive. They have worked hard. And they've delivered great results through all this. And we've done some things that none of us would have imagined we'd be able to do working remotely. And, kudos to all of our technology providers that make it possible because we've used every ounce of it to keep ourselves going strong through all this.